Hello and welcome. It's 420. So let's get high. I've been reading from my forthcoming book, Zohar, Beyond the Black Hole. And I just sent it off to the publisher today. Have a little postpartum moment. But I wanted to keep reading. I hope you're enjoying this. We're at chapter 4, which begins with the heading, Daughter of Voice. Besides prophecy, there is what is called Bat Kol, daughter of voice, blowing in the wind. Not everyone hears the voice, and there is no requirement for those who do hear the voice. This seemingly random occurrence is used by Borei, creator, to intervene through Shemayim to make a desired change in creation, like a writer adjusting the words to a text. Shemayim transmits needed information down to Eretz in a subtle way, not to disturb the delicate balance between light and dark or sway the expression of free choice. Channeling the writings of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai down to Eretz was done in the form of a conversation with Moshe Shem Tov de Leon. This direct connection with an ancient teacher who lived upon Eretz, but was concerned enough with the human predicament not to completely leave at death, who lived in the earth's ether, unable to transmit his arcane knowledge to the earth. The righteous always suffer because of their sensitivity to the pain in the world. The most difficult death is considered like pulling thorns from the hide of sheep, which inevitably ends by ripping out the flesh. That is how the righteous leave the world. Rabbi Shimon was not a prophet, receiving exact messages through the mouths of angels, nor was he a spirit meandering through Shemayim, but rather a high soul with a direct communication with someone who was looking for Shemayim and found Rabbi Shimon. Moshe Shem Tov de Leon insisted to his end the words of Zohar are the words spoken to him from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, 1,000 years after having lived upon the earth. The text of Zohar corroborates this conclusion. No one could have composed this text other than Rabbi Shimon, Botzina de Kardanita, harder than hard. Rabbi Shimon was able to burrow into each word and concept, piercing to the very essence, releasing light into the world projected through the open window of his wisdom. Though one of the rabbis, Rabbi Shimon was an independent soul who spent his time on Eretz seeking the secrets of creation so he could eventually write them down in Shemayim, then deliver them to the earth 1,000 years later. From his perch above the world, Rabbi Shimon was able to see history before history happened. He could see the darkness of our time and prepared a meal for the world in the future to satisfy our longing for the past. Rabbi Shimon wrote Zohar to funnel much needed light into the world at this time, known as Sof Yamim, end days, when the world will coalesce together and practice war no more. This is our time. We can accomplish this vision from the past. Zohar is light coming from the very beginning of creation, inscribed with all the information to bring about redemption on the world, redemption of the human being and the entire whole olam, the world. Rabbi Shimon knew the cure came before the sickness, so he prepared a strong medicine for our time, which is why Zohar was written. Where is Zohar? Zohar was written in Shemayim from what occurred on Eretz, yet from the stories and descriptions, the place of Zohar is somewhat obscured. Where did Zohar rise? The answer necessitates a short explanation about the nature of creation. The four elements, Aish, fire, Avir, air, Mayim, water, and Eretz, earth, are directly connected to the four-letter name of God, Yud He Vav He. Stacked vertically, form the stick figure of a human being. Originally, the four elements stacked up according to thickness: fire, air, water, earth. But needing to preserve aquatic life, God commanded water to seek depth instead of covering over the surface as is natural of primordial water. Therefore, water freezes from the surface instead of the center like all other substances. Scientists find traces of water throughout the universe, as if creation is floating in a womb of celestial embryonic fluid. Astronomers have discovered a thin mist of water covering the moon. The water that flooded the Earth 4,000 years ago came from the planet Mars, whose waters had not been commanded to seek depth, and therefore only covered the Earth in a fluid veneer enough to wipe out terrestrial life. After the flood, a river of water was left in the sky. Abraham came from the Tower of Babel, built on Mars, and was considered Ivri, beyond the river. Since time is a spiral and not a line, what transpired at the beginning of creation happened at a faster speed than the same event happening now. Also, life was more ephemeral, able to be lived beyond the clouds, making terrestrial travel effortless. The 7 years of famine, which brought the Jewish people down to Egypt, also obliterated much of the delicate structure where coarse spirits resided, awaiting entrance into the world. In general, the moon is the repository of souls, ready to descend down to a body to begin another lifetime. However, the eventual spiral of time has made the world less hospitable to spirit. Rabbi Shimon lived in a time when the space above the earth was in shambles, resembling how things were on the earth. The rabbis had the ability to leave their bodies and ascend into the heavens, bounded by the halfway point between Earth and Moon. There they could easily move from one place to another, meeting each other on the road, because the multitude was only found on terrestrial ground. The succulent firmament surrounding the earth just after the flood had dried up and was crumbling down to the ground. It was the perfect place for Rabbi Shimon and his cadre of peers to delve into the secrets of creation. Close to the cave in Meron, where Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar are interned, are ancient ruins with massive pillars strewn about, the remaining remnants of a large building, depicting how the heavens look to those able to descend into the broken celestial world made from heavenly dew lying fallow, slowly drying into rain. Perhaps those ephemeral remnants still remain, but no one has the eyes to behold them, and no one has the mind to comprehend the invisible, ephemeral actuality closely tied to the earth. The nature of earth is to constantly disintegrate. So too, this even refined ephemeral reality. There are 6 rings in the spiral calendar begun almost 6,000 years ago. Each rung in the spiral is 1,000 years long. In our time, here at the apex of the spiral, culminating after 6,000 years, related to the 6 outer planets, are about to converge for the 1,000 years of woman and peace on Mother Earth. Ultimately, Zohar was written in Shemayim, but the occurrences chronicled in Zohar happened during Rabbi Shimon's life and were memorialized in Zohar because moments of Torah and truth spoken with love live forever. The big question is, where are we and who are we that Zohar is needed to rescue us from the predestined time in history known as the fruition of the earth happens at the end of the 6,000-year male calendar, when man becomes his best, so man can then enter into the 1,000 years of woman and peace at the highest point of refinement. Living life as if time is a straight line from birth to death is simplistic and simply wrong, because life is a spiral from beginning to end. Life begins in a wide curve of time and ends in a rapid degradation of flesh as the spirit leaves the body. At the age of 20, we begin living life in decades. Each decade is unique. As the body transforms from decade to decade, each decade different from the one before. The 20s are a decade of discovery. The 30s, the time of strength. 40s, the decade of understanding. By 50, one has led enough life to be an advisor. By 60, you're either an elder or an older. 70 is considered a full life, and it takes strength. It takes strength to get to the 80s. Living life as a line reduces each person into a cog in the machinery of deception, trying to give purpose to a life which is devoid of purpose. Knowing where we are in the curve of our existence is important, but even more essential is knowing where we are in the curve of reality, the timetable set by the Creator. After Adam eats from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, God asks him, Ayeka, where are you? The question lingers until now, as this attenuating line of light sent from infinity goes nowhere unless the end of days is acknowledged. Man is a line going nowhere. Woman is a circle going round and round. Only when combined does the spiral materialize. The curve of creation is feminine, as is our outer planet of the solar system. The only planet to curve into another planet's orbit. We can never know where we are in the line since the line goes very fast to nowhere. But once the line enters into the circle, time takes on form. We are 5,780 years into the spiral of time. The 1,000 years known as Sod secret is when all of the secrets are revealed, including the secrets contained in Zohar. Zohar is revealed in our time as a final goal, global step to be taken. Zohar comes to illuminate the past, present, and future. The future of our planet is about to whirl into the 1,000 years of woman and peace. Time is not linear. In our time, much happens at a quick pace, but to no avail. Since time is culminating, the inner workings of are moving very quickly like the inners of a clock, but causing little change. Yet it is that little change that will change everything. Why Zohar? The oral Torah was written 2,000 years ago to preserve the accumulated knowledge from millennia, enabling the Jewish people to go out into the exile. During the first 1,000 years of Rome, during the first 1,000 years of Roman exile, the oral tradition expanded. Throughout the world, Jewish communities produce scholars from the depth of darkness, revealing new insights, recording fantastic findings in endless books, some in various native languages, but Hebrew and Aramaic are the two arms of the Torah. Zohar was laying fallow in Shemayim, waiting the appropriate time to come down and be revealed on the earth. The time for Zohar is now. Though 7 centuries have passed since the writing of the book Zohar in this physical world, time was needed to get accustomed to the light for the illumination to seep into the consciousness of the Jewish people. The Talmudic term used for a blind person is sagior, too much light. The light has only increased during this time, but the prevailing darkness has kept the light distant. Over the last 100 years since Zohar was first translated into Hebrew in 1906, 5666, many translations have been attempted, but all lacking a clear explanation as to the nature of Zohar. From his perch in the expanse between Shemayim and Eretz, where Rebbe Shimon and his cadre of followers traveled, the future took on clarity as the spiral of time became evident. Endemically incorporated into the spiral of time are vectors acting as measurements, delineating cycles. Rebbe Shimon could see to the end of the calendar when the darkness of lies obliterate facts and knowledge, when all that remains are glints and shards scattered senselessly about. The remnant of world knowledge remaining at the end of days has been skewed by scholars, charlatans, and fools into something other than emet, truth. Rabbi Shimon understood how the concept of Yerida Tadorot, dissension of generations, causes emet to leave the world. Emet is not visible due to the darkness. Some even contend there is no emet. In this dark time is contrived technology, spurning arrogance, despoiling the world, even polluting outer space with junk and a godless rampage. Only the light from Zohar can save the world. But to bring this light to the earth would be too much for the world to shoulder. So Rabbi Shimon became the intermediary. He became the oral voice to Zohar. Rabbi Shimon waited until the 1,000-year cycle of Hod retreat was over. Then at the beginning of the last 1,000-year cycle called Sod's Secret, he revealed Zohar, the secret of celestial writing from Rabbi Shimon to the earth. Just as Rabbi Shimon was an intermediate from Shemayim to Eretz, he needed an intermediary from Eretz to Shemayim. Rabbi Shimon found a mystic named Moshe Shem Tov Dilion in Spain who found momentary openings in Shemayim to peer through and gleam a glimmer of light. One day he found Rabbi Shimon staring back at him. Zohar reads like a conversation. Parts of Zohar reads as though being read from a book, but these are unattributed passages. These unattributed passages are often interrupted by past conversations from his time on earth with his son Elazar and his scribe Rabbi Abba, along with a smattering of other personalities and names. Topics are easily replaced by new ideas, generating further questions. Zohar is not declarative and does not pursue answers or adjudicate law. But Zohar is a flood of information derived from the author of Zohar, written into the firmament of Shemayim. Why year 5,000? The question remains, if Rabbi Shimon wanted to inform the generation on the cusp of the 1,000 years of woman, then why deliver the information 700 years early? The answer is obvious. Time was needed to filter this heavenly information down into the earth, to be planted like a seed, growing through the centuries and finally giving fruit in our time when the secrets of Zohar can be revealed. This 700-year process has been an arduous journey from the heights of Shemayim down to Eretz, where Borei, Creator, wants to be known in low. The spiritually illuminated text of Zohar blinded the eyes of those who tried to peer within, becoming yet an unopened book. Later mystics tried to peer within, but were unable to understand the celestial language disguised in Aramaic. Yet, there was no question as to the validity of the text and the acknowledgement that only Rabbi Shimon could have written such a book. Moshe Shem Tov Dilion was merely a conduit. The words flowed through him, getting written down on the earth. All good writers aspire to merely be a conduit from heaven. Humility is the fertile soil of creativity. It would be another couple of centuries before the key to Zohar would be given. Isaac Luria Ashkenazi, known as the Ari, Lion, came to teach in Sfat in northern Israel, opposite the cave where is interned Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar. A small group of mystics had gathered to share their knowledge. They prayed to God to send them someone who could unravel Zohar. The Ari was living in Egypt, a young man in his 30s, but with his eyes opened. Everything was revealed to him. He had a vision to move to northern Israel, and that is what he did. The Ari lived in Sfat for 3 years, then passed away from the flu. A young man, he left behind a small group of Kabbalists. The Ari lion only spoke, claiming it was hard enough to bring this light to the world through speech. He wrote nothing, but from his teachings in those 3 years in Sfat, Israel, was born the school called Kabbalah, receive. The Ari is quoted as saying, I came to earth only to teach Chaim Vital, one of his students. Chaim Vital authored 13 books after the Ari passed on. The books from Chaim Vital are the core to Kabbalistic thought, whose aim is to open up Zohar. The Kabbalah, in all its different manifestations from subsequent books authored by other mystics, are extremely technical, tracing the dissemination of light through the universe. Only the geniuses were able to open the books of the Kabbalah for another few centuries until Baal Shem Tov in Poland, Russia, who refined the teachings of the lion down to a degree where this knowledge could be fed to the people with the condition they are not allowed to study Zohar. The source of this prohibition comes from the Talmud, written down 2,000 years ago in the tractate called Rosh Hashanah, New Year, where the commandment of hearing the shofar, ram's horn, on the day of the new year is rescinded by Rabbah, a pillar to his generation, writing down the oral Torah. The Jewish New Year happens over 2 days. In the fall, commemorating the creation of the first human being, called Rosh Hashanah, head of the year. These 2 days correspond to the 2 hemispheres of the brain. 10 days later, on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, is considered the third eye. When the first day of Rosh Hashanah, head of the year, falls on the Shabbat, we refrain from blowing the shofar, the ram's horn, because Rabbah, 1,500 years after the Torah was given, said so. How can one man, even a great man like Rabbah, take away a commandment from all the Jewish people, and why? The first rendering of the oral tradition through the Talmud was accomplished by writing in brief, encoding much of the information hidden beneath hints and cadences. The real reason behind Rabbah's restriction was only known to the rabbis of that time, who understood and trusted Rabbah's decision. For 2,000 years, the tradition of the Jewish people is not to sound the ram's horn when Rosh Hashanah falls on the Shabbat. Rabbah's decree was given at the same time Rebbe Shimon was living Zohar. Rabbah's decree and Zohar are endemically intertwined. The job of the rabbis is to make confines, adjudicate boundaries, and define measurements. The restriction of sounding the shofar goes far beyond the law. The greater light was to be hidden until the right time to be revealed, but not by the rabbis. Seemingly, the rabbis should be the ones revealing the secrets. Blowing the shofar on the Shabbat brings about the great light, which would be defined by the rabbis if not restricted by Rabbah. The great light is about expansion, and the rabbis are about contraction. Therefore, the low, not the high, need to define the great light of the future. According to Rabbah, the shofar should not be intoned on the Shabbat to prevent someone who suddenly awakes on the day of Rosh Hashanah and wants to intone the shofar, but no one else is sounding the shofar, so he cannot go and ask the rabbi's instruction. He will have to do it his way, without instruction from the rabbis. For God, this is being known in low, and no one else should blow the shofar, is not to disturb this one individual who, because of his low status, is the only one who can bring about the revelation of Zohar. God wants to be known in low. The genesis of creation. Each generation is lower than the one previous until time is about to run out on the 6,000-year calendar from the first Rosh Hashanah at the advent of the first human being. The rabbis, by virtue of their study of the Torah, the heads of the Jewish people, but God is more interested in being known by the low people, by the heel of the foot called Ekev Meshike, heels of redemption. The time has come. A low person is the most disconnected person from society, like a homeless person, a person without family or friends, divorced from his people, from his country, yet having an intrinsic connection with the Creator and the desire to forgo everything to fulfill the will of God. Walking a narrow bridge above a deep abyss, ridiculed for his path in life, but admired for his tenacity and independence. The Ari taught sometimes a very high light can come down to a very low person, since the greatest light is emitted from the black pupil of the eye. Such a person am I.